I mean,
And
I'm
I
in
always
the
say, I've been called worse, so that's fine.
I'm in the small elite that know that it's Mostert.
Right.
Wait, it's Mostert now. I
Well,
had it
like the
right the first.
49ers, right?
Yeah, I had it right the first time. Right, it's Mostert.
It's Monster, right?
Yeah. Okay. See, then it got in my head, and I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Anyway, all right. So we'll get started now. We're actually live now already. This is a little bonus for people watching live. Joining me now are Mike Mostert. See, now I did it. No, I had it right.
Yeah,
See,
you
we
got
were
it
doing this before we got
right.
started. I had it right, and then it gets into your head as soon as it's like, well, don't say it the wrong way. Joining me now are Mike Mostert and Tony Covino, who is they are both part of In Theory. They have a great song that we're going to talk about in a little bit, the River song. But Mike, I talked to you back in September, so it's nice to see you again. And Tony, it's nice
Yes,
to
good to
meet
meet
you.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when Mike and I spoke last fall, we talked about some of the different kinds of music that he felt were influences to him. It included jazz, R&B, soul, and even some techno. So, Tony, what were some of the musical influences you had just when you were younger, before you even started to take any interest in making your own music?
I mean, a lot of different bands. Obviously the Beatles. Um, I started getting in like in high school. Started getting into like harder rock, like AC/DC and Zeppelin and stuff like that. Um, but my family's a musical family, so I followed. My cousin Joey Franco was in a band called the Good Rats, Long Island, and they used to play the Coliseum and all places like that. So it was sort of like I grew up on their music, and then slowly got into when bands like Striper came out and things like that. The harder stuff. But I also love all the classic singers. And anything with good vocals on it, I'm a fan of. It could be Michael Jackson. It could be Lady Gaga. I don't care. If it's a good vocal, then I'm a fan of it. So I'm never really attached to one particular thing. I'm more of a fan of good vocalists and great melodies and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Lady Gaga, because like when there have been those performances where it's just her at a piano, you're like,
Yeah,
you can hear her pop music and you're like, yeah, she can sing, but that's like,
yeah,
when you're like, oh wow, so she's got all that. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right though. When if somebody's a good singer, yeah, of course there's going to be exceptions where you can put good vocals over some truly terrible music, but I think for the most part it's not going to get to the point where we as consumers are hearing that. And I agree.
yeah,
Mike, sort of a similar question for you. I know that when we talked last time, we talked about some of the eclectic musical tastes, but question really for both of you: when does it go from I like to listen to music to, oh, I feel like I've got some knack for anything? And what was did you like to just play guitar? What was it first for you, Mike? And then I'll ask you the same thing, Tony.
So you know, someone did I start playing, or what really perked my interest
Yeah,
into
what
playing?
was it that made you think like, oh, I want to start playing? Did you see somebody, whether it was on TV or a performance, or just you just wanted to kind of approximate what you were listening to?
No, there was a few things. I mean, I grew up in a very same thing as Tony, a very musical family. And I started playing guitar at 5 years old. But I guess the person that really got me into rock and playing more than anybody is my brother. So he was 3 years older than me. So when you're 11 years old and they're 14 years old and he's a bass player, you're looking up to him. So he's one who exposed me to at the time Rush and Black Sabbath and all those bands, Aerosmith, and it goes on and on and on. And he's one that took me to my first concert, and actually my very first concert was Triumph, and that really just got
Wow,
me going.
yeah.
Of course, I had all the Kiss records. I had Aerosmith Rocks, and I would just listen to it over and over, and and mimic all those rock guys, and and eventually, as time went on, some other musical influences came into my life, and where I got into like Return to Forever and Al Di Meola and those guys, and but I've always just been a rocker at heart first.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when you think, I mean, you mentioned Aerosmith Rocks in particular. I mean, I'd say Toys in the Attic is kind of the same way. That's one of those ones where every track you're like, well, why would I skip this? You know? And
Right.
even bands like Aerosmith later in their career, there's probably like, I could probably skip this one or that one. But in that moment, and, you know, probably because it makes an impression on you when you're impressionable. But I mean, the music from that era, it's it was like unskippable, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And to be able to soak all that in, I'm sure it made a huge impression on you. Tony, sort of the same thing, really. Was there like an equivalent of like an Aerosmith Rocks, for you, an album that was just like, I just got to keep listening to this again and again because it's so great?
Yeah, I think, thinking back when I was, younger, I would say like the Kiss Alive record. Um, Only for the presentation, like, you would open the record up and it's like the whole, like, these guys weren't they're not normal, like they're not someone you'd see walking down the street. I've always admired like the rock star kind of thing, like being different. That sort of got me attracted to wanting to get into it, But yeah, definitely Aerosmith rocks, a lot of Dio stuff, But like I said, I always listen, like Michael Jackson and things like that, where, you know, uh, a great melody is a great melody, a great singer is a great singer. So I've always tried to encompass a lot of different flavors into rather than just being a rock guy or a metal guy.
Yeah.
I sort of like to blend all those little different things in. Even older bands like Three Dog Night and stuff like that. I mean, they have great songs. Cactus and all those bands. So I just try to encompass like all that stuff into one. But I would say I remember sitting on my living room floor with the Kiss Alive record and opening it up and seeing that stuff. That sort of got me intrigued. You know.
Yeah, and there's definitely, obviously, that is one of those live records that's a little bit less live than it seems. But
Right.
when you're a kid and you just hear and you're just like, oh my god, you got cannons going off and
Yeah.
all this stuff, and
Right.
that presentation, I'm sure is very exciting. So you guys both have sort of soaking in a lot of music, and it's great. I mean, look, you referenced Michael Jackson a couple of times. I mean, there's a reason that the Thriller is still one of the best-selling records of all time. Because of sure, some people probably came for the Eddie Van Halen guitar solo on Beat It, but I think for the most part, you were there for a guy who could, sing like nobody else. So, how do you guys get to know each other and start working together? When does that happen? And did you have mutual friends, or how do your paths cross? I'll ask you, Mike.
Well, our paths crossed. Well, Tony had a band, Big Mouth, at the time, and I always make that running joke. So they were auditioning guitar players, and they had the big, roll call of one, and I was the guy. So I passed the audition of one, and then musically, Tony and I just hit off, right away as musicians, as friends, and I always have to, not to throw a damper at things, but also the thing that bonded Tony and I way back was, both our brothers died, within several months of Tony and I knowing each other. So that made, like a stronger bond than, I mean, the strongest family is stronger than family. It's a club that, I don't wish upon anybody. And I think I think that's the passion, the emotion that still lives with us, whether we do music or whatever we do in our lives. But that's how we met, so we're friends, we're bandmates, we're business partners, but we have this special bond.
Yeah, and I can imagine that as terrible as it is to lose any family member, the fact that you both had somebody that a lot of times people always mean well, but they usually don't know how it feels. But you actually had somebody who literally knew how it felt, and I can imagine that had you both been lucky enough and something terrible like that didn't happen, you'd probably still be friends. But I can see how something like that coming along, in that moment, really
And it's
forges.
really also kind of ironic that my brother was one of my musical idols and got me into music. for Tony, I think he left that out earlier. His brother was signed to Atlantic in the late '60s as well, when he was at 15 or 16 years old. So Tony was following his brother's footsteps as well. So we both had great role models to get us into the whole music world. So,
we touched.
We're fulfilling their dreams in a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know we touched on this a little bit last time, Mike, but so you guys actually had a contract. I think you were under contract in the 90s or the early 90s, I think, right? And
Right.
that didn't work out, but you guys, it's not like that put a damper on it. You guys still continue to collaborate after that, right, Tony?
Yeah, that was 95. We were signed to EMI Records in Europe. And but it's sort of like that, we were a little too late to the party, because then all the music started to change as far as, the grunge thing and all that stuff. But, on its own, the project was amazing. And we were doing quite well with it. It's just that the music just turned, and we were just at the wrong place at the wrong time, or at the right place at the wrong time, however you want to say it. We always collaborated. We always worked on songs. We have a lot of songs placed on sitcoms, and and it's not like we wrote music for sitcoms. It's our songs, and they used our songs to be on sitcoms. We have something on, this movie called Sex Drive. Seth Green's in it. It's a worldwide release. We got a song in that movie. We've been on Showtime, HBO, all kinds of stuff as far as our music goes. It's
Elisha's NBC,
me and Mike's
Lifetime.
music.
Yeah.
Right, and so these were songs that you didn't write for the shows, and they weren't like theme songs or anything. They're just music that got included on those shows.
They would hear it, and we always joke, like, a lot of our songs always, if there's a strip club scene or something like that, they picked for whatever reason. They picked one of our songs. A sex scene. They picked one of our songs.
Oh, nice.
Anna Nicole Smith is driving down the highway, and she's sticking her hands out the
topless
sunroof.
in the car scene. Yeah.
Topless.
Wow.
She's topless to one of our songs, which, hey, man, we're happy to oblige.
Yeah, that's funny because when you think about it, your strip club scene, it depends on the budget that they have for music licensing. They maybe their first thought is let's go girls, 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 Motley Crue, and then it's like, oh wait, no, that's an insanely expensive song. It's hey, we're the affordable Motley Crue. Come on, let's use our music in that. But that's great, and I don't want to get too bogged down in the minutia, but that it sort of fascinates me. So because of that, do you guys get, probably not huge, but do you still get residuals from songs that were used, or do you sell them for kind of forever? How does that work? I'm always fascinated by the business side of things. So
we're still surprised. Every quarter we get a royalty statement from, for everything we've been on, and it's still kind of always interesting to see how many countries were being played and what shows. And, it's because it's always quite a detailed report that we get. But yeah, still to this day. And then this past year, we just got picked up for this new documentary. I think it's North by Current or something like that.
Yeah, North by Current. Some biography or something.
No, it's a documentary about somebody who goes back to their roots and discovers how deteriorated their neighborhood is, and they're struggling to get their family out of their this environment, and they follow this person, how they this, whatever you want to call it, not necessarily adventure, but the struggle to get his family, save his family out of the the bad neighborhoods or the slums in Detroit.
Well, it sounds like the song for that project would not fit in a strip club scene. So I think it's good. I'm just guessing that it's good to have a diverse body of work that, can be included in a lot of things. Yeah, I mean, it's you'll hear sometimes actors, and my wife's a TV writer, so sometimes those royalty checks, you're like, oh my gosh, look at this envelope, and you're like, oh great, it's for 18 cents. That's fantastic.
Right.
But well, so that's great. So you guys continued to work together for all that time, and for those of you watching, you can see that Tony's got some sweet In Theory merch up on the wall. How does In Theory come about that you guys start working on this specific project, and how long have you guys been doing it?
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead. You want me to do it?
No, go ahead, Mike. You tell the story better.
Well, In Theory came from originally I was doing a record, the Go-Go Tuner family record. I have this company, a tuner company, and I work with many high-profile artists and all across many genres. So I decided to do a roster record with all my artists, and it covers from hard rock to metal to blues to R&B to Disney ballads with orchestras to Latin pop. I mean, all across the board. And I'm mixing, matching different folks that normally wouldn't be in those genres. So I'm putting a country guy on a metal song. Like a great example, I do this like Sue Shred song. And like, where would you ever hear a song like this where I have the bass player from Spyro Gyra, Ice-T's band, the guitar player from Rat, and then Johnny Highland, who's probably like the king of chicken picking, and then myself. And we put that on a metal track. So I was doing all stuff like that, trying to put people out of their comfort zone. Nobody was ever able to hear the track until they got to the studio. And anyway, so that's how I was starting that. But also what I want to do is I want to reunite with Tony and create a band for 2020, or at the time 2019. And I didn't want to do what we did in the past. I was like, Tony, how would we write in 2019? What would be our version now? Because since then we've had so many life experiences, more musical experiences, that's really just crept into you, and now it's coming out of you. So we were able to bring that to the surface, and that's how In Theory came about. In Theory made technically its debut on that record. We did 2 songs on that record, and then of course there's other tracks people want to listen to it, where I have Tony singing with this young gal doing. She sort of sounds like Adele, and then Tony's doing his vocals with the Alabama Orchestra. So there's a lot of little, there's a little bit more than just In Theory on that, but that was the launch of In Theory. And we got such a great response from the record. And then Tony was like, let's keep continuing. And, and then it just kept elevating and elevating. And the amount of interest we've been getting from radio and hosts like yourself, it's just been, tremendous. So we said we have to keep rolling and moving forward with this. And I have to say, we've definitely, worked, especially through the pandemic, we killed ourselves over the last year. And now we have about 5 songs done off this record, and we're continuing to write. In fact, last night, that's why I'm a little toasty today. I ended up doing my session till about 7 a.m. this morning, so I'm still recuperating, but proud to say we finished this next song, and now next week we'll start another batch.
Wow, no, that's great. I mean, it's you can't call that burning the midnight oil when the sun is up. I mean, I don't know. That's beyond an all nighter. That's actually pretty impressive, and I appreciate you actually being with us. If you were up that late. You're talking about.
It threw me off this morning when it was sunrise coming up. I'm like, well, I went to the studio, it was sun, and now it just threw me off.
Well, we were talking about the new music, and I did want to talk about the River song, which is the new song that you guys have out now. And for those that are watching our video version, you'll actually see the music video up on the screen while we talk about this song. Talk about the River and where where the idea for the song comes from. I thought it was interesting that a song called The River, I was reading a description of it that called it swampy, which, not only is another body of water, but it kind of captures what that sound is. Why don't I ask you first, Tony? Tell us about The River.
Well, the river basically symbolizes, obviously it comes from the perspective of someone who's looking for their way in life, and for whatever reason, just can't find what they're looking for answers. In other words, they're searching for their meaning in life, and the river symbolizes, it could be anything, it could be your maker, God, whoever you want it to be, and the water in the river symbolizes, tell me what I'm supposed to be doing, basically, like wash me in your river. I've traveled a long road, and my past has taken its toll. That's the intro, and I think we can all relate to that. Like we've been kicked around, and maybe there's things that we wanted to accomplish in our life, and we haven't gotten there, but we also haven't given up. So it's very important. So we go to the river or go to whoever you want to go to and say, like the bridge says, give me a little bit of what you want from me. So basically asking, what do I got to do to get to what I need to be, who I need to be? I could feel like I'm supposed to be doing something and I'm not there yet. Help me, basically. That's the encompass of what it's supposed to symbolize.
Yeah. And in terms of sort of what it means, creatively, and what it means to you, Mike, when you listen back to this song, and as I said, people that are watching the video version, they're seeing the video, and it's really just sort of a lot of images of kind of outdoors, and I think that it really kind of, it's sort of, while you're listening and you're just sort of seeing all this, it sort of opens it up in terms of just thinking of yourself actually traveling, whether it's down to the river or just, a drive on the open road, that sort of thing. Talk about what this song says to you, sort of about, just having this kind of an outlet, basically like going down to the river.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, it's not funny, but I think the original theme of the song "The River" is because I'm always telling Tony about the river, because if do you know about Muscle Shoals and the theory of the river and the legend of the river?
I mean, I've heard of Muscle Shoals, but I don't know about the legend of the river. No.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. That's that's why there's been about 4 billion records sold out of this small little nondescript town. Going back from Aretha Franklin, Percy Sledge. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous who's recorded here. And it's really, like I said, and it's economically depressed town, but it's surrounded by the Tennessee River, and it goes back, thousands of years with was folklore with the Indians, saying it's called Singing River, and there's inspiration from the river of music that you can hear at night, and it gives you this this inspiration of music that you didn't really think that was in you. And and whether you interview the Rolling Stones or Bono or Paul Simon or Rival Sons or you name almost every legend out there, or Aretha Franklin, like she said, she couldn't get her groove on until she was here by the river, believe it or not. And but it's almost everybody who talks about this place talks about this inspiration from the river. So I always tell Tony about the river, and every night I go to the river. I would take my dog to the river, around sunset, and soak it in. And everybody who's ever come here, and Tony is one of those examples that I've brought to the river, they leave a different person. That there is something about that, inspires this music that you didn't think that was in you. So that's how this whole thing came about. It's a really great documentary, and they talk about the history and, and this one particular woman, when the Indians were moved from Muscle Shoals, back in the 1880s, 1890s, somewhere around that time, to reservations, to Oklahoma, she couldn't hear the music anymore. She was a kid, 13, 14 years old, and so they couldn't do the dances, they couldn't do their chants, they couldn't do any of that on the reservation. But the inspiration was no longer there. It took her 5 years to walk back from Oklahoma just to get back to Muscle Shoals so she can feel the inspiration from the river.
Wow, that's really actually impressive to spend that much time getting back there. Tony, you mentioned at the beginning that you sort of growing up. I think you said Long Island. Talk about going to somewhere that is so completely different. Not that you hadn't been anywhere, but experiencing that as an out of towner and seeing it for the first time. It's one thing probably for Mike to talk about it, but what was it like actually getting to visit Muscle Shoals and just sort of take in the area where, as Mike said, all this great music came from?
Yeah, it's I guess the word's like surreal. It's like you've seen all these buildings, like in the past, all these, even Rolling Stones went down to Muscle Shoals to record a couple of songs, and you always see pictures of these buildings, and then when Mike took me around when I first got there, we went to a few of these locations, and it's like Mike said, it's just like a building, but it's like you're looking at it and there's so much history there that there's more to it than just the building, obviously, and you sort of get that vibe when you're there. It's like there's just something in the air, and when you're there, you get motivated as a musician. You think of all the past people who've come there, and you just get motivated. You just get into a different frame of mind, almost. At least for me, you get into a different frame of mind, and I'm a very perceptive person, so I'm just feeling all the stuff, and then when we go into record or even honestly even to take pictures, it just puts you in a certain mood. But it was really cool. You hear all the stories, and even like Steven Tyler went down there and did a lot of stuff, and he touched the walls where all the famous people were singing, and he'd cry, and you just get a vibe off of that. Like if you're open to that.
Steven Tyler just broke down crying. He told the story on Joe Rogan that he had to touch the walls, and he just broke down crying and feeling the energy, and then he ended up recording some stuff down here.
Yeah.
And just because I wanted to be sure, I did take a second to look up. So the Rolling Stones songs, the best known two that they recorded there are Brown Sugar and Wild Horses, and especially like Brown Sugar. When you think about, there's so many great Stones songs that we could spend an hour talking about it, but it's just getting that distinctive sound and those songs going on to become so iconic. It shows that when you're a well-oiled machine like the Rolling Stones were at that point, but then it's like, but it's going to give you a little bit of a different spin. And what you're saying about Steven Tyler, I'm sure that, just getting to go somewhere. And I don't know, I think sometimes, just as somebody who listens to music, you can tell the difference sometimes from like where a band actually is living when they're recording. It's not so much about the physical location of the recording studio, not that couldn't be a big part of it, but where are they spending their other time when they're not actually playing? And sometimes that I think that really comes across. Do you guys get together and actually record these songs, or were you doing it over the pandemic and just sending them back and forth, or were you taking the time to get in studio together, Mike?
Well, Tony and I, Tony was staying in New York because of the pandemic. With the exception of Tony, I was around pretty much traveling, with the musicians, going all over the country, just recording. But the majority of what I did was out in Muscle Shoals. But Tony and I did a lot of Zoom sessions, a lot of writing sessions. Almost on a daily basis. So it almost felt like we were in the studio together. No, I always make the joke that, Tony, especially at that time, wanted to kill me because every day, we were pushing each other. We were pushing each other so hard over it was like 6-7 month period just to get these tracks just right. But yeah, but Tony and I really was pretty much almost 5-6 days a week, just going back and forth, just sending back tracks, and and we, like I said, we put up the Zoom or we do FaceTime, and I'd play him a rip, and then he would sing me a rip, and there was a lot of collaboration that way. So it was. I feel that we were, while we're technically not in the same room, we were physically in the same room.
Sure. Yeah. I think just the way that technology is now. I mean, I was speaking to somebody yesterday. I was talking to Jeff Pilson, who people know from Doc and a lot of other work that he's done. He's in Foreigner now. He was just talking about how he was able to collaborate in a way where he works with George Lynch, the guitarist, and he was in a different studio, but the way that it works now, you can actually control the levels from somebody else's studio using your computer in your house. And so I think that, trying to do this even 10, much less 20, 30 years ago would be really hard, because you'd be like, mailing tapes back and forth or whatever. So I think that the fact that everything can be done so virtually, and like, whole radio shows happen where no one's in the same room anymore, and it just sounds like they're having a conversation in the same room. And did you find that the collaboration, Tony, was probably a little bit different than what you were used to, but that it was still pretty effective way to work together?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, get back to the whole virtual thing. I mean, the thing about, I believe, like our stuff, it doesn't sound like that's what happened. Like, we sound like we're in the same studio. And unfortunately, with a lot of stuff that I hear, it sounds like, okay, let me do a guitar track, I'll send it to you. Okay, let me do a bass track, I'll send. And it sounds cool, but it doesn't sound like a band. I honestly believe that our stuff, you would never know that we weren't in the same studio. And because we were constantly in communication and talking and stuff like that. It was a little different.
To add to that too, I was going to say, to cut Tony off, sorry, Tony, but to add to Tony's point, with all the musicians, whether it's a bass player, drummer, or backup singers or keyboardists, everybody was always in the room. So Tony was always the guy that was stuck in New York, for the pandemic. But I also think that's part of why we had the vibe as well, like the band vibe, because that's very important, that at least my perspective as a producer, is that I have to be there. I want to see the interaction. I want to give my input. So whether I'm recording in California or recording in Muscle Shoals, I had to be there for every minute of the recording, because Tony is right. I do believe when you just mail tracks back and forth, I think you lose the interaction. You lose like the reaction. Like, I'm playing a song from you, and I see like a reaction out of your face, then I may want to play a little bit different. I may want to play a little bit harder. I want to maybe do something like, oh, yeah, he liked that, and then, that makes you play a little bit different. And then you're watching me react, and back and forth. And then that's where I think the magic of music comes from. It's the interaction of all these folks. But when you just mail in tracks, which, and again, it's effective for a lot of people and it works, but I just think you lose a little bit of the magic of what really makes music.
Yeah, and to that point, Mike, I can imagine it's a lot of like non-verbal cues. Even though you could see everybody on a screen, just like we are right now, if you're actually like playing in the same room, there could be sort of like a kind of like a nod of the head, or just like a sort of look of the eye and all that. But Tony, I can imagine that it was still effective for you to kind of feel it. Maybe it helped that they were all in the same room, but it certainly doesn't come across as something where the vocal came in a lot after the fact. So I'm sure that everybody's happy with the way it turned out. In terms of reading the press release that I got, Tony, I had heard, last fall I heard the song Heroes that you guys put out, and then this song, The River. I think one of the things in that press release that I saw that I thought was true really comes across, and they not to embarrass you, but it does compare you to Chris Cornell and Lane Staley. Those are both two great distinctive voices. And the Chris Cornell thing really comes through in this song when you say River Gonna Save. And I mean that as a high compliment that
Yes.
it evoked Chris Cornell, you know, who is obviously one of the greatest singers of the last 30 years. And did you feel like Chris was an influence on you? You know, when you just started actually singing, you know, was that somebody that you felt like, oh, I mean, who isn't going to be impressed by him? But was he a direct inspiration on you?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. And when I hear that, it's like, I'm like, come on, Chris Cornell he's
Yeah,
a vocal god, you know what I mean? But
sure.
I definitely would like to have somewhat of what I hear in him come out in me. So when I hear that, it makes me feel good. Like there's just a lot of singers that I admire, Chris Cornell's one of the guys. Lane Stanley, he's one of those guys. Recently, Jay Buchanan from Rival Sons is one of those guys. Anywhere from Glenn Hughes, to Robert Plant. I mean, whenever someone said I sort of sound like one of those guys, I'm like, it's amazing, But to be compared to Chris or Lane or whoever it might be, is great. But more importantly, I think it's the sound of the band. Like it works. The band is the sound, and the singer is part of the band. And I think that's what those singers brought out. Like they weren't just amazing singers; they were great. They were in great bands that wrote great songs, and I think that's what our band is part of. Like they call it now the new modern, the modern classic rock, which they put, Rival Sons, all these other like bands, Dirty Honey and bands like that into that group, which is to me is more like a throwback to the 70s rock and roll, where it's just like musicianship and great songs and we're going to kick your ass every night on stage. And, I think that we fit into that group. Not only do we fit into that group, I think that we also have our own sound. So we're not really copying anyone, but we're all in that same vibe. So all that stuff is just really cool to me. And, I appreciate the compliment.
Sure, yeah, and I think it's a great point talking about a band like Rival Sons or Dirty Honey. I mean, those are bands who I think they're well produced, but they're not overly polished. I think that distinction is so important because obviously an album can be way too overproduced, and you lose something. But I think that they're examples of bands that certainly aren't. And I think that that's kind of what you're saying is this sort of modern classic rock. It's like, yeah, these don't sound like songs that were recorded 45, 50 years ago, but you kind of feel like you did when you listen to them. And I don't know. Do you feel like, Mike, that that's something that you guys are able to capture with the songs you've done as In Theory so far?
Yeah, I think exactly that's what we've been able to capture is I feel like we have 1 foot, in the 70s and 1 foot modern, so if we put that title together, actually it's probably correct. We are like a modern classic rock. But that was very important to bring it. We want to bring it, like I said, bring it to a modern sound, but keep the rawness of how the bands used to record and play in the 70s.
So there's this song, The River, and as I mentioned, Mike, you and I spoke in the fall about Heroes. What kind of reaction have you been getting to the music you've been putting out? And I should let people know that they can find, let's see, In Theory Original is Instagram, and In Theory Band is the website for people that want to keep tabs on where they can find you. What are some of the things you've been hearing as people have listened to the music you've put out, and some of the more encouraging things you've heard in that time?
Well, always, it's funny. The very first thing is, well, there's always two things. First, always they're always complimenting Tony. It's always like, who is that singer? That's always one of the first top reactions. And so I really think like Tony's, really just emerged as like the next crop of, like these great singers that could be like the next vocal legends, like you're saying, like a Cornell. I do think in a lot of ways he's the next coming of a Cornell or a Tyler or one of those guys. He has all that. But as far as, like were you talking about like style? Is that what we were talking about on this?
Yeah,
I think the feedback we've been getting is people can't really pinpoint what we're about. So they can hear like, oh, I hear a little Soundgarden, I hear a little Zeppelin, oh, I hear a little, you can even hear like a little Rage Against the Machine. They hear a little bit, just enough. There's enough of a blend of everything where it sounds familiar, but it still sounds fresh. And that's been other feedback we're getting, like, we've never heard this, which is why we were coined by a few DJs, like, we're like the swamp metal or the swamp rock, because there is a swampiness to it, but it's still rock, maybe more rock. So we've been getting a lot of that. And the other thing that we get, there's a lot of depth to our music, whether it's lyrically or production-wise. And I always recommend, listening to our music through headphones, and then you can actually really start hearing what we've done, again, from a production standpoint. And you hear, wait, there's this instrument, oh, wait, we're taking this out, we're dropping this note, we're bringing this in. It's really kind of like, like how I used to listen to records. I would listen to it, 5,000 times. I would listen to those records when I was a kid. I would hear something new each time. And I think we're able to capture that within theory. Like every time you put it on, you will hear something that that was, maybe you didn't hear the first 100 times, and all of a sudden like, oh my God, I didn't realize this keyboard's doing this thing over here. Or, oh, I didn't hear that. Now we're changing the melody of the vocal here, but it's not obvious. So there's a lot of little nuances that we've been able to put into our music. And a lot of musicians and people that really love music and really dig deep, they're the ones that really have been picking up on that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what you're saying in terms of a good pair of headphones. You'll definitely hear things that if you listen to it those 5,000 times without headphones, and then you listen to it 5,000 more with headphones. It's I think the first time I was ever like really listening with headphones, and you start to hear things in different ears, and then it sounds like it's moving behind you, and you're like, oh yeah, that doesn't come across at all when you're like, driving in your car, listening on the radio, So I think it's great to be able to enjoy that. Guys, it's great to get the chance to talk to you. And what is next? I assume you guys have some more music that you're going to put out there. And is there any prospect of live shows, either later this year, maybe next year? What do you think, Tony? Do you feel like that's something that might be in the cards, or is it still too early to tell just yet?
Yeah, it's definitely in the cards. Right now focus is on getting these batches of songs done and possibly getting our first EP done, and then hopefully we can get on the road, maybe get an opening slot with somebody, or do our own thing. But I think as powerful as the songs are that are recorded, I think live would be another level. It would be really cool to bring these songs to life on stage in front of people. Because me and Mike come from that old school way. We used to rehearse 6 days a week, and everything was about a stage show. And with this whole pandemic, we haven't really gotten a chance to. That's a whole nother thing. Like you see a lot of these bands now, they're getting back and doing virtual concerts or live concerts. Just to be in a room with the guys and rehearse is like it's like you're starting over almost. It's a really cool thing. So I can only imagine when our time comes that it's going to be amazing. But I think we want to get our music done, and then hopefully we can now start doing shows, and we have an EP to sell and give to people and things like that.
Yeah, Mike, in terms of more music to put out, is there something that's close that you guys plan to put out soon, or you're just continue to work, and when it's ready, that's when it goes up, and again, people can find it in
Well, we have
theoryband.com
three
or
more
in
that are
theory
ready.
original on Instagram. What's that?
Well, we have three more that are ready.
Great.
What we'll probably do is release one more single, and we'll wait, and then we'll release the EP after that. But we're going to do one more single with the video, and right now we are working on the video, which is it's a whole other process. But that'll we're looking at probably about another 3 weeks, and that video will be done. And yeah, again, it'll take the listener on a roller coaster of what In Theory is about, and it's exciting because it just seems like as we keep progressing, there is such an evolution in our sound, and every time we start moving forward, we're just discovering. It just feels like we're on the tip of the iceberg of discovering our sound, but each time we're doing it, we're just getting better and better and better. And I think it's surprising us as well. Of course, you're trying to achieve it, but when you're getting the results, it's like, wow, we are getting better and better and better. And there's a lot more surprises coming. And in fact, we just got done cutting a track. I won't mention, some special guests, but we brought in some special guests that will be on the record that are, some other legends. Not that we don't have the legends on our other stuff, but yeah, so there'll be some more curves and twists for the fans In Theory, and I'm sure it's probably guys that you maybe possibly have interviewed on your show as well, but they're part of the evolution of the band.
Well, and if nothing else, hopefully that there's music that sounds great to be played, whether it's on the headphones, off the headphones, inside the strip club, outside of the strip club, wherever it might possibly be played. I've really enjoyed what I've heard so far from In Theory, and looking forward to the next few songs, and hopefully seeing you guys live sometime, whether it's this year, next year, somewhere down the road. Thanks again to Mike Mostert and Tony Covino. And I said it before, I'll remind you, intheoryband.com, at In Theory Original on Instagram. Thanks so much for your time, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind words and all the support. We really appreciate it.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us, man.
Absolutely.
We really do appreciate it.
Thank you guys for making new music. It's tough to find the good stuff out there, so I always appreciate it when it comes my way. And this has all been great, and I can't wait to hear more. Thanks again to the guys from In Theory.